Good morning. We're reading in Book 1, Canto 3, the Yoga of the King, the Yoga of the Soul's Release. We're on page 24, line 80. In the first couple of cantos, we've been introduced to Savitri, and the main issue of the epic and of Savitri's life, which is to confront death. And death representing kind of all of the darkness, all of the retrograde tendencies in the creation. And then in this canto, Canto 3, we're introduced to her father, the king. And we're told in the beginning that a world's desire compelled her mortal birth, that is Savitri's, and one in the front of the immemorable quest, protagonist of the mysterious play, in which the unknown pursues himself through forms and limits his eternity by the hours, and the blind void struggles to live and see, a thinker and toiler in the ideal's air, brought down to earth's dumb need her radiant power. So that is King Aswapati. He is the front runner of the evolution. And he brought down the need, he brought down Savitri, the power of the Divine Mother herself. And in this canto, we're introduced to his kind of extraordinary yogic attainments. And this will continue for a number of cantos. We will see Sri Aurobindo really starts out the epic with, quite a dramatic opening and bang. I mean, we're first introduced to Savitri as kind of an incarnation of the Divine Mother, and then quickly we're introduced to Aswapati, her father, who is also apparently an avatar, because the way that Sri Aurobindo describes him, his human self like a translucent cloak covered the all-wise who leads the unseeing world. So we see he's also not an ordinary human being. And here we're given a detailed look into his spiritual realization. So we can maybe begin or continue on page 24 in the middle at line 80.
Which line?
80.
81.
81. Helmut, would you like to begin?
The static oneness and dynamic power descend in him. The integral Godhead seals. His soul and body take that splendid stand. A long, deep preparation is man's life. A circle of toil and hope and war and peace, checked out by light on matter's obscure ground. In his climb to a peak no peak had ever trod, he seeks through a penumbra shot with flame, a vague reality half known, ever missed, a search for something or someone never found, cult of an ideal never made real here, an endless spiral of ascent and fall, until at last is reached the giant point, to which his glory shines for whom we were made, and we break infinity of God. Across our nature's borderline we escape into supernature's arc of living light. This now was witnessed in that Son of Force. In him, that high transition led its place.
Thank you.
What does penumbra mean?
Penumbra, it's the kind of a shadowy light that, for example, might surround the moon on some nights, that kind of a glow, or might surround an eclipse of the sun. There's kind of this, so it's kind of a mix of light and darkness, shadowing something. We see in this passage that Asupati's spiritual realization is not simply a release into kind of a static peace, but he has that, but then that is the basis for a dynamic realization of power that also comes. So this is that static oneness and dynamic power descend in him. The integral Godhead seals. So this is the integral realization. Seal, kind of a stamp, I guess.
Yeah, godlike.
Official seal, official stamp.
It means the Godhead transforms his body, his mind, life, etc. So it puts itself like this. What does it refer to exactly? I don't see.
It's an affirmation, a confirmation of the divine.
Yeah, this is what I think. Okay.
And it becomes, the realization becomes overt.
The latter part is a bit confusing. He is talking of long living preparation in man's life. Is he talking about man in general or Ashwapati particularly?
No, he's talking about mankind in general, I think. So this kind of a long preparation. So our life is just a preparation for something, for a higher realization to come. So it's kind of that course of evolution that mankind is in, that stage of our evolution. It's still just a preparation.
On this goes together what you just said is when her face is seen through this face, her eyes through his eyes, her being is his through one's identity. Then is the being who made the aura divine. The aura divine.
Mm.
And then you, that means we, a normal human being, we can see the divine.
Mm. Yeah, it's not just inward realization, but the divine force kind of comes out into the manifestation, into the person, and he becomes an expression, an overt expression of the divine. So all his actions, all his thoughts, all his movements are expressions of that divinity within. It becomes apparent for all to see, to all to witness. In that way, it's overt.
That is when man is identified with the mother of the world.
The mother represents the divine force. So it's the dynamic expression of the divine. So then that is, that power, that expression, it's peering out through the individual's eyes, the individual's movements. It's getting expressed. The divine is getting expressed outwardly.
I think here it jumps from Ashwapati to man, man to Ashwapati in this
Yes.
2 lines, last time. These 5-10 lines is going from man in general to Ashwapati and back to man again.
But we saw right in that beginning of the canto, he's representing this upward evolution of mankind. He's leading that evolution, right? So he's the forerunner, but we also are going through this. You know, we're just in the preparatory stage. He's further along, that's all.
Moving apart and again coming down in general terms, in general unity, embodied with the unity and then the correct. So many places you find a general phenomenon of man. Both lines are universal line, right? Universal line. Human consciousness.
So that's
And
again long thing.
And he describes this endless spiral of ascent and fall. So that's kind of the nature of this evolutionary climb in which mankind is situated. We kind of go up and we come down, and we go up a little higher, and we come down and we go up a little higher.
But somewhere we discussed that once man is human, then he doesn't go down further in the animal life. Is it that way? That's what we.
Yeah, I think so. It's that way. But this is just within the course of our life, or.
By the way, I'm asking.
Yeah. But that's transition from animal to human. You know, it's a big transition. So according to Sri Auroville, you don't slip down again.
Sometimes the reaction mind is dominant. Man is only one, that is like being another, except one. So here, yes, and that also is dominant. The man is unique and one. Within us, soul in evolution.
Nihon, would you like to continue? Maybe just give her a minute to.
Original and supernal immanence of which all nature's process is the art. The cosmic worker set his secret hand to turn his frame birth engine to heaven's use. A presence wrote behind the ambiguous screen. It beat his soul to bear a titan's weight, defining half-human blocks and natural strength. It breathed his soul into a swiftly art. The craftsman of the magic sculpture of the self, who labors at his high and gifted flame in the wild workshops of the wonderful world, models in word time is a rhythmic part. Then came the abrupt, transcendent miracle, the masked imagery grandeur to the outline, a travel in the occult womb of life. The strange magnificence of things to be, a crown of the architecture of the world, a mystery of marrying earth and heaven, a next divinity, the mortal skin. A seer was born, a shining guest of time.
Thank you. So we're kind of introduced to the idea here that of the divine immanence, the divine within the evolution is working.
Yes, here we first told seer. The seer was born in simultaneous of time. Last minute.
Yeah, but let's start from the beginning before we go to the end. So I want to kind of start from the beginning, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay. So we're shown that there is the divine within who is working. This is the cosmic worker, working within, fashioning the being. Here, he's referring mainly to Aswapati. So refining his nature as if kind of sculpting a statue. He's working on this being, carving, refining half-hewn blocks of natural strength. It built his soul into a statued God.
For me, it's also interesting the second line that all nature's processes and the art of all nature's processes is, how do you say, connected to this immanence. It is not art point itself, it is behind this process in all the nature's processes.
Yeah, that's why nature is so beautiful, right? Because it's kind of an art of the divine immanence.
Not Allah, also color the process beautiful.
And that's how Mother also speaks of art. It's not, just making kind of decorative things you put on the wall, but it's all of life can be art, and you can, all of life can be a beautiful expression of the divine. All one's own life, we should make it that way.
And it be line 105.
Mm.
It's all to bear titles with. So it works on the nature too.
Yeah, it beat his soil. So that's the physical, works on the physical, refining the physical.
Yeah, so then you can do big work, like titles work, you can do big work in this world.
Oh, I can work with the divine way, divine presence that is very high. And beyond that things, we need a very strong thing. That is why the soil, within the soil is like that.
But generally, title is negative, and that's why I say physically it's very strong and powerful.
It is not
So we have to be prepared for
very
it.
deep. The divine work is very deep.
Yeah, we shouldn't maybe get so much into negative, positive, because, you know, the negative things that are here, the powerful, strong things, that's also part of nature, and that's part of the overall plan. So that also has to be included in some way. Without that tightened strength, then we would just have kind of weakness, mildness. You know, we want also something strong and vigorous.
So I'm learning also in the Sanskrit course with Vladimir. There is in the Sanskrit, it's not negativity. You don't have in Sanskrit positive and negative. You have only that it's not at its place. And so that is a lesser understanding of positive and negative. And I think for me also to understand that the divine needs strength to do the work. That is very much
This
needed
was
for us.
the positive part of the title.
Yeah.
Is being done.
The verse told that the goddess of Shiva, he invoking the title systems and title force that beings and this is the rest of it.
So as the divine kind of works on the material nature, on the vital nature, modeling in inward time his rhythmic parts, refining the nature, then eventually, as the evolution proceeds, he's able to bring out the abrupt transcendent miracle of a finished or a,
Next is something change.
yeah, a greater step is taken in the evolution. So it's at first, it's working at travail in the occult womb of life. This divinity is at first hidden within, and eventually it can come out. A mystery of married earth and heaven, annex divinity to the mortal scheme.
He's talking past tense, I think he's referring to Ashwapati now.
Yeah, this mainly is kind of referring to Aswapati. I think the building of him, but again, he's representative.
Yes, this is a little bit, but I think this is the past tense, last 7, 10 lines, so it is referring to Ashwapati is having further revelation. Then King of the
So here at the end, yeah, a seer was born, a shining guest of time. So this is Aswapati and his realization. Anandi, can you continue from there?
king minds limited fundamentalism. In the glittering forefront of the night and day, the gap was rent in the all conceivable. The conscious sense of being went rolling back. The landmarks of the little person fell. The island echo, joy, its continuity. Over past wars and world bridging forms, life barriers opened in the unknown. Abolish what conceptions tokenize, and striving of subjection rigorous growth, new responsibility with natural medicine. All the grey division were torn, and broken the intellect's heart and its blue. Truth and passionate found men's sky, and mine wishes for me. The bounded mind became a boundless light, the feeling itself matched with infinity. His march now soared into an eagle flight, out of a pernicious scripture. Wisdom appraised him to the master's craft, and made him an archmason of the soul, a builder of immortal seeking hands, an aspirant to supernal kingdom, freedom and power called him from on earth. Awoke mind's twilight and life's starlit night, where dim the dawn of the spiritual day.
Thank you.
Briefly, what plant?
Excuse me?
Briefly. What plant on the night? It's one question.
Yeah, a griffin is a mythical creature having the head and wings of an eagle and the hind part of a lion. So this is the griffin forefront of the night and day. So this kind of eagle is the kind of day, the forward moving flight, and behind the lion, strength.
Should I read the Griffin's listening?
Sure.
Griffin in Greek mythology, a fabulous beast with the wings and head of an eagle and the body of a lion. It was thought by the Greeks to protect the gold of the Scythians. And by transference, the meaning of the word can also be construed to be a grimly earnest guardian. Grimly earnest guardian.
To be?
Not understanding.
The last, it was thought by Greeks to protect the gold of Scythians, and by transferring the meaning of the word can also be construed to be a grimly earnest guardian. So Griffin is basically grimly earnest guardian.
Couple of lines lower down, there's a reference to a little person.
Yeah.
What would that be?
So he's referring to a release from the ego, a release from our sense of being a separate individual being, and this kind of joining with the all existence, with the oneness. So it's a spiritual realization. He also talks about this a release kind of from the mind, broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. It's kind of, the ego is a kind of a mind constructed sense of ourselves. And the mind it's always limiting. It's a defining kind of instrument. So when that can be quieted or overpassed, we can enter into a kind of a sense of oneness with everything.
Can you explain this connection? The line for him, mind is limiting, firmness ziehst du ab. Why sterben Roses there?
Well, again, he's kind of crossing the limits of a mind-defined reality. You know, we construct a sense of reality, a sense of who we are, but it's not actually a real thing. It's kind of something that it's a construction to help us, you know, understand the world and to get by in the world. But it's not the reality of things. So for him, he's kind of gone beyond that.
Because mind creates a sense of separateness from the reality, from the universal thing, and that's where it feels an ego. So this guy has gone beyond the egoism and separateness and gone to universal.
This line, let me explain like that,
Which is this?
125. The islands ego join this continent.
Yes.
I think something very relevant to this time. All nations, this nation fight the others. So if we overpass something like that, these things can be stopped a little bit. Very relevant movement is.
You're referring to like the wars and at the collective level. Yeah, there are also these kind of collective egos.
Covenant is a treaty, no?
Covenant?
Covenant, it's a treaty?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see where.
128.
Just read the line.
Abolished were conceptions, covenants.
Covenants like rules and regulations.
He's going to ask you.
It's also interesting, all the gray inhibitions were torn off. Because the mind also, you know, it limits us. We have all this sense of, well, I can only do this much, or I can only go this far. You know, we're kind of, gives us a sense of comfort and knowing where we stand in the world, but it also holds us back.
And Empyrean, I forgot.
Yeah, it's the Empyrean is the highest heaven. So it's celestial, sublime, these kinds of things.
What number is there?
Empyrean. It's, you know, in some kinds of cosmologies, there are different heavens, and this is supposed to be the highest one.
Yeah, should I read again from the
Okay. Okay.
Empyrean being or pertaining to the highest heaven. Ancient Greek cosmology identified it as the realm of subtle and purest. um, and and being or pertaining to the highest elements, like I just said. And ancient Greek cosmology identified it as the realm of subtle and purest fire.
So maybe we can continue, Ramesh. Would you like to read? Would you like to continue, Ramesh?
Yeah.
At the break then.
As so he his larger self, community feeling his movements less and less.
Yeah.
At the break.
Greater work. The fearlessly or knowledge zero to less. The lines of safety regions guards the war. Minds, souls die.
A little louder, please. A little louder.
In the first steps move a small earth and wide in vast geo. In hands, esteem like the transparent night. We part lightly like the giant's bow. Left is company in sea and security. The powers that sleep, unused in man. She made up miracles in armor until the calm part of life. Magnificently natural at his height. Efforts that would scatter the stem of mortal earth. Pursue the duality of mighty beings. Aims to sublime fallen natures giving him. The gifts of mystic proudly came to him. They were his life's better and peaceful.
Thank you. Let's pause. You can remember here that he has this integral realization of both the passive and dynamic aspects of the divine. And here, Sri Aurobindo is now kind of describing some of this dynamic side of his ability. And these powers of the spirit are coming to him. We saw before the kind of the divine mother looking out, or the dynamic divine looking out through his eyes, this kind of thing. So these divine powers are finding expression in him, through him. As he's kind of gone beyond the limits of mind, he's entering into this greater field of activity and nature of the higher divine nature. And so these forces are beginning to move him.
This line 155, what is a giant's bow? He caught up lightly like a giant's bow that's slumbering in the secret cave. Secret cave, that part of the story I know, but the giant's bow, the ship's bow or what? A normal bow and giant's
Like a bow and arrow.
Okay. He caught up lightly like a giant's bow, and that's they're not connected.
They are connected. He found this bow in the cave, and he easily lifted it up, and it's a giant's bow. It has great power. And he was able to, he found this great power in the cave, in the subconscious cave, and was able to lift it up and easily use. Maybe.
Indian mythology considered Ram said cut of that bow.
That's what I'm saying. No, that's he's referring to the same thing.
Yeah.
Great strength.
There's something very small movement from one side, make a huge sense to the other side. Go means you just put the arrow and it goes and make a big sense. So that change is important. It's just like
Actually, I don't understand the sentence. He caught up lightly like a giant bow. Does it mean to catch up?
It's right.
He lifted up.
He did it.
it's not literally, it is just inherent meaning.
Yes.
Now, he called up the powers that sleep unused magically.
Yes.
So,
That's the operative power.
thank
The
you.
giant boat is a metaphor.
But I like so much he made the miracle in normal act. Every act is divine. Normal, but you put divine in your act. Normal act.
Normal act. So for him, he could perform miracles just, in the course of his daily life. I mean, it was just a normal thing for him.
I read recently a lot of book Foundation of Indian Culture, Ideal of Human Unity, showing the describe. Don't go very, very high in the earth, but sample, the divinely sample. That's all. I tell you something, but it's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, here he's finding these great powers asleep, unused within man. These things are there within us, but we don't look for them, we don't develop them.
This is reason the culprit. Reasons us limits ourselves.
Exactly.
That
To judge is not interesting, I don't do. Not at all.
He's in the higher mind.
Is he in the higher mind? Is that what you're asking? Exactly where he is, I don't know, but he's finding these powers deep within him.
Unused. Sleep unused.
Yeah, exactly in what realm he's finding these powers, he doesn't define it so carefully, but somewhere within.
Powers, we spoke in case in the mind, in the light, heart, there is the body. Two powers are there, taken up. Then the soul is released.
Okay, we go too much in the head, we're not going to find it. It gives you.
These powers are very ingredient the soul. So first we have to take out those powers. Then only soul will be released in the next prayer.
It's okay what you said, Larry, inside, but you manifest outside. For example, you see Savitri Bhavan in the manifestation. is expression of the soul.
Yeah.
Alors, it's very, very, very important. It's not only inside and nothing.
No, but that's where he's finding the power to achieve these outer things.
Yeah. That is very, very important. Somebody don't understand this aspect.
Huh?
How do you remember?
I'm not catching that.
Asking him when he made this briefing, but he used the power. No, this, I don't know, this energy makes me very
So where did that energy come from? I don't know. Just comes.
It's not my energy alone. The energy of many people. Can you
We don't hear.
let's go on.
He was just saying it was the energy of many people, but maybe some other energy asleep. Tinakan, would you like to continue? Would you continue reading?
Pure perception led its producer to joy. Its intimate vision waited not to think. It enveloped all nature in a single glance. It looked into the very self of things. Deceived no more by form, he saw the soul. In beings, it knew what lurked to them unknown. It seized the idea in mind, the wish in the heart. It plucked out from great folds of secrecy the motives which from their own side mankind. He felt the beating life of another man invading with their happiness and their grief, their love, their anger, their unspoken hopes entered in currents or in pouring waves into the immobile ocean of his calm. He heard the inspired sound of his own thoughts re-echoed in the vault of our minds. The world's thought streams traveled into his pen. His inner self grew near to other selves and bore it in its breath, coming time, yet stood untouched, king of itself alone.
Thank you.
In fact, what he is describing here is sadhana. A lot of things that he describes here, we can see in the record of yoga. Lots of things.
And I feel what he is describing, one can experience daily in Auroville. We have special talk, how it gets reflected by the other person or feelings or things like this.
So you feel these things are going on all the time. This passage of feelings or thoughts from one person to another. If we're maybe attentive, more attentive, we might perceive these things.
So we have to yet stood untouched, king of itself. I think for this to reach then, it is then the first line of this chapter. So he grew into his larger self. So to one part is to experience all this connectedness and thoughts and feeling, and on the other side, something to go in a larger sense so that you have any personal view on all.
Yeah, this would be one part of our larger self, the thoughts and feelings of those around us. But there are also higher parts of our greater self, this, the pure, infinite existence and the power of the divine and all of these things are also part of our larger self. But as maybe in the beginning, we can expand outward a little bit and be more perceptive of others and their energies, might be a kind of a baby step towards that greater self.
175, that when he traveled the beginning life of other men, and on this program, invading being their happiness and grief. This something feeling of oneness that we actually want. Something very identity. So though we are bodily separated, but true oneness is that. Difference in what doesn't matter.
Yeah, but more evolved soul will be like equanimity also is there. I feel your feelings, but I don't get emotional about it, but I try to do whatever is best in the situation. That's knowing your feelings or ideas, but in a equanimity sense, and then do whatever is needed to be done in that situation.
That means both we are guided by one soul, but separated. But body is separated.
Unity, yes.
That is the true oneness we.
These things are kind of an evidence of our oneness, right? The fact that we're influenced by other people's emotions, or we're influenced by their thoughts and ideas. We're not isolated like we think we are. We're not separate.
We want these things.
But the difficulty or, problem of that is that if we're only kind of connecting with others that are on the same kind of ignorant level as we are, then all of that interconnection is only, of limited help. We have to also get to a kind of a higher realm, to a higher level. If we're just invaded by other people's feelings and emotions and anger and fear and these kinds of things, that's not of much help. But here he was saying that, but he was able to stand removed and unaffected by it. He could also stand back from it, see all of these movements of energies coming, but remain unaffected. Somehow there is another part of our being which can stand back and separate from these things.
There was an interesting talk from Manoj and Muriel on the spirituality in Auroville. And I was so touched exactly to this point that he said, we have to live in unity, but it's not this hard, it's something beyond. And we have to go to get a wider perspective. And this is, I never heard it so clearly before to see this, but also the process here.
And I remember Shrivindu used to see the thoughts coming in of others. Has anybody else felt something? I've never felt that one. Thoughts coming in your mind from somebody else.
Yes. Exactly. It's true.
It's true. I mean, higher evolution, but somebody else felt like that.
I think that we have a protection.
No, others thoughts coming in, like your thoughts coming in.
Okay. Anandi wants to say something.
I think that better if you just keep with line 185. He said in a few words what we can try to explain to
Please say.
Yet stood untouched, king of himself. Yet, começo filho.
And so with that, you can continue.
Even in the last chapter, behind that, there are also the same things are there. So you can feel the understanding of other what is going on around. It is some sort of our mind, not your mind.
So I think I would like to continue now. I would like to continue reading. I think we're at the magical accord. Okay, let's continue reading.
A message of authority, quicken and attune to ethereal symptoms, the old earthly spirit. It raised the servitors of minds and life to be happy partners in the soul's response. Tissues and nerve are turned to sensitive hold, records of luster and ecstasy it made. The body's names the street's acolytes. The heavenlier functions with a finer mode lead with its grace dance outward of witness. The soul's experience of its deeper seat, no more slipped, dragged by matter's limits. In the day walls closing us from wider self, in the secrecy of apparent sleep, a mystic track beyond our walking hall, a door guarded, veiled in by matter's force, limiting things, unseized by earthly sense, the world unseen, unknown by outward mind, appear in the silent essence of the soul.
Thank you. Let's pause. Here we see his nature getting kind of attuned to his soul and being expressive of the soul and maybe helping the soul to further develop its realization.
This lines between the senses and all these things. Yeah, a little bit with the physical body stuff, something also discussing. Right?
Yeah, he's talking, all the parts of the nature, the mind and the life and even the body, all of these are getting attuned to the soul within, as if they're kind of instruments on which it can play a symphony. Sri Aurobindo often refers to, the body and the life energies and the mind as instruments They're actually, they're not the thing itself. They're just instruments of the soul.
Can you explain this line? The body's names the street acolytes? 192.
Well, acolytes are kind of attendants or assistants, and often they're referred to as, like a priest in a church has his, kind of altar boys or kind of attendants with him to help. So in a kind of a religious service, sometimes the assistants are called acolytes. But in general, an acolyte is kind of an assistant. So the body's means, the means by which the body moves and expresses itself, I guess, and these things became attendants of the soul. So maybe this tissue and nerve and, these kinds of things. He has this kind of musical metaphor running through a lot of this.
Some sort of divine, is it body divine or divine body something? And that is the most that type by matter problems. It's nice so something body divine. We have somewhere some say like they can know that divine body.
Yeah, here, but he's talking about the deeper sheaths. So he's talking about kind of our subtle, physical, subtle, mind sheath, subtle vital sheath. These things, these kind of inner bodies that we have, we're not aware because of matter's dominance in us. Because we're so kind of hypnotized by the outer physical, we don't sense these deeper parts of our being. But even our vital has a body, even our mind has a kind of a body in which it can move. These are the deeper sheaths that we have. So he's becoming aware of these. And this is, part of our wider self, our greater being that we referred to earlier. Margaret?
This he said, yeah. He said, in secret chambers, looking out into the luminous countries of the unborn, where all things dreamed by the mind are seen and true, and all the life longs for its drawn close. And all that the life longs for is drawn close. He saw the perfect of their starry homes, wearing the glory of a deathless form, laying in the arms of the eternal peace, that in the heartbeats of God ecstasy. He lived in the mystic space where thought is born, and will is nursed by ethereal power, and fed on the wide will of the eternal strength, till it grows into the likeness of the God. In the witnesses of occult rooms, this mind built walls on hidden interiors, lurking passages, open the windows of the inner side. He owned the house of undivided time. Lifting the heavy curtain of the flesh, he stood upon a threshold servant watch and peered into gleaming endless corridors, silent and listening in the silent heart for the coming of the new and the unknown.
Thank you. He's describing his entry into the inner being, into the subliminal consciousness. Huh? Starry, of stars. Heavenly, yeah. So he's describing, I think, this subliminal being in general terms at all different levels. So very high, he's seeing the perfect in their heavenly homes. But also he's, looking out into corridors and interiors of the mind.
The next time, 07, and all that life longs for is drawn close. Means whatever we yearn for, he sees it very closely.
Yeah.
And this is also very interesting. 200.
Louder, please.
Slide 213. He lived in a mystic phase of what is born. We don't know what is born. That is very interesting. We know what is coming, but we don't.
Sometimes there are these one-line sentences that often are kind of very powerful. So here he says, he owned the house of undivided time. So for him, that was just his natural kind of state. That's where he was normally. Be able to look into future, past. he owned that house. That's so powerful. And it's quite interesting towards the end there that he was peered into gleaming endless corridors, silent and listening in the silent heart for the coming of the new and the unknown. He gets a sense of, like to be in this very quiet state of consciousness, which can see far beyond into the future and what will come. Maybe the new being, what that will be like. But to go into that state where you can perceive that, something else.
This is a state or something for experience. When you are in that state, something new coming. So new experiences, and a new experience happens. So something new coming in the deep of sadness.
It's biographical.
I don't understand.
Biographical.
Say that again.
It's fear of people. Biographical.
What is that?
He's saying it's biographical.
Sorry, you can miss.
Biographical. It's fear of people's experience.
Okay. Thank you.
And the verse 213. 213.
Please read it.
And we is nursed by an ethereal power.
Very mysterious.
Ethereal is he refers to the perhaps to the powers which are in the akasha, ethereal, which nurse, which help the weak.
Yeah, I don't see the line. Yeah, a will is nursed by an ethereal power. It's a divine power taking up our will,
But
taking
he
up.
calls it ethereal. So I thought perhaps it has to see with the akasha.
Can you ask heavenly, again, heavenly or divine, higher powers? Yeah, he's referring to that only. Nobody is being defined by divine power or higher power.
Shall we continue?
Right? Lifting the heavy curtain of the flesh, he stood upon a threshold, serpent washed, and peered into gleaming endless corridors, silent and listening in the silent heart, for the coming of the new and the unknown. He gazed across the empty stillnesses and heard the footsteps of undreamed idea, the far avenues of the beyond. He heard the secret voice, the word that knows, and saw the secret face that is our own. The inner planes uncovered their crystal doors. Strange powers and influences touched his life. A vision came to higher lands than ours, a the consciousness of brighter fields and skies, or being less circumscribed than brief-lived man, and subtler bodies than those passing flames, objects too fine for our material grasp, acts vibrant with superhuman light, and movements pushed by a superconscious force, and joys that never flowed through the mortal limbs, and lovelier scenes than earth's and happier lives.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo is giving us a little taste of these heavens and these inner realms of our consciousness, which he's going to go through in, such expansive detail in book 2. In the next book, he's going to go, one stage by stage through all these different worlds and describe these kinds of beings at all these different levels. Here he's giving us a kind of an overall taste of some of these things.
There's a higher meaning in this sentence. It's 229, and saw the secret place that is our own.
Some kind of mystical experience, I think, that
Is it something like Krishna's face?
yeah, one doesn't really know. He doesn't define it. It could be, that idea of our psychic being, maybe he saw his psychic being, but one doesn't know.
The original face.
Yeah, it's definitely the divine, behind it.
1991, the story of our person of suffering much. Suffering was not only very auspicious suffering. This picture is there.
So kind of what? Serpents or snakes or something like that. Yeah. We'll see in, well, I guess it's much later in Savitri's experience, she kind of goes through this realm when she's entering her soul, that I think it also is kind of surrounded by these serpents and things. Yeah, these are kind of symbols of kind of power and one has to be careful going in there. And maybe they kind of protect those inner realms from kind of people's experience, who might kind of come across such a possibility of entering and that are not ready in some way, are not prepared.
Serpents are generally like watchdogs. They protect you. In mythology, serpents protecting, basically, protective layer.
Almost all the walls have some relation with the substance, no? You know, you say, what it is.
And we're sitting on it.
This may be also a sign to the transformation. There's always transformation happening there. Then also be careful, as you said, not just take it as static or. For me, the servant of this is a symbol of transformation.
Yeah, they can, be dangerous or they can be divine. And, they kind of carry both of those.
Each zone is, it means that actually souls, means that part of soul, but that taken the place in us.
That could be.
Passing to that corridor, somewhere it is coming.
I think we stop there for today.